From Atlanta News First Plus, this is Sports Tonight.
Welcome into Sports Tonight. I am Sports Director Bailey Burmaster, joined alongside our digital producer Ellie Parker, and we have quite a show lined up for you today. We're going to talk the latest on Brock Bowers. We have Falcons on their turnover problem. We're going to dive into some of the NFL storylines, and Michael Bradley, U.S. men's national team, kind of one of the most historic players to play for the team. He is set to retire. But before we dive into this, Ellie, we have yet to have you on the show to discuss Brock Bowers. So before we kind of dive into the latest, I want to hear how big of a loss you think this is for Georgia.
So if you're watching this and you don't know, I usually write the captions for the VOD and the podcast. And the last time we talked about Brock Bowers, I put "the man is the Georgia offense" because he is. Georgia just lost its offense. Yes, they've got two or three other options. They've got Ladd McConkey. They've got all these other wide receivers, Arthur Smith, etc. None of them are Brock Bowers.
No.
None of them can really pick up what he left on the field. And we saw that against Vanderbilt.
No, and I think you bring up a really solid point. I was actually looking into this of where these receivers, because everyone says, Georgia has this great receiving corps, but I haven't really seen it in my first year covering the team. I know Ladd McConkey had a great season last year, but he's been a shadow of himself. So I went to go see, and Brock Bowers, I think, is in the top 10. I want to say he's number 9 in yards for receivers this year. The next closest, I think, was Marcus at 18 or 19, and then Dominic Lovett at like 22. So I'm not totally sold. They're going to have maybe they're not getting, they're not necessarily getting thrown to that much because Brock is in the game. We're going to find out a lot more as the offense
My instinct
goes.
is that they'll do what they did against Vanderbilt and rely more on Dominic Lovett. Hi, Missouri Tigers fan here. I have some experience watching him.
Familiar.
So that's my instinct, is that he's the new number 1 until Brock comes back, which probably won't be that long.
No. So head coach Kirby Smart talking tonight, just a couple moments before we came on air, and he said the main priority was going to be the fact that they want him healthy. There is no timetable. They just want him healthy. So that is the priority. He says this tightrope surgery that Brock is having, Lucky Lawson also had, and that they're very familiar with it. It's something in the NFL that's really common, so he feels like he understands the process a lot more. So I think that's really interesting to look at. Actually, Emily Gagnon was there in Athens for the press conference. She also got to talk to Mike Griffith of the AJC about what kind of this means for Georgia moving forward.
Emily Gagnon here with Mike Griffith from AJC Dog Nation. Mike, Brock Bowers being out for the Dogs, what does that mean for this team?
Yeah, it's like a whole nother team. I mean, the dimensions shift, and Kirby Smart has to find some other playmakers, lean on more playmakers. Emily, you always hear next man up. I feel like it's next men up for Georgia right now.
What do you think that his absence will do for this offense?
Well, I know what it better do. I mean, everybody had better step up and realize there's a void there that can't be filled by one person or one scheme or one play call. It's going to take a number of things for this Georgia offense to maintain any sort of continuity and firepower. When you think about it, Brock was the most explosive player on the team by far. Now, maybe they catch a break because Ladd McConkey came back and played almost 40 snaps. That's the most playing time that Ladd's had all year. You remember he missed his first 4 games with a back injury and had one of those hits out there, looked like a car wreck. He got up from it and without any after effects. So that's kind of the good news that came out of the Vanderbilt game, is that I think number 84 is back and ready to go.
Sticking with Brock before we get to Ladd a little bit more, how much of a leadership role has he taken on? And I say that because he's a very quiet guy.
Right.
And I often wonder, in the locker room, do you think he speaks up a lot and speaks out to the team? Do you think that leadership will be missed?
Yeah, I think the leadership is more with Brock's presence. You got a dude like that, a go-to guy, right? We heard so many people, Ben Watson, then we heard Mark Stoops compare him to Michael Jordan. Okay, and Jordan had a presence, and the older audience is going, yeah, we know, and the younger audience is going, LeBron. But Jordan had a presence, and you knew he was a go-to guy, and a guy you could count on in the clutch. And I think there was a sense of comfort that, hey, as long as number 19's out there, we got this. There's a guy, Carson Beck certainly knew when he scanned the field where Brock Bowers was. Well, now all of a sudden, there's no Brock Bowers, and who's going to fill that go-to role, and where does Carson Beck look now? And that's why I said everybody's got to step up. Also, the Georgia offense becomes much easier to game plan for because every other defensive coordinator starts with number 19 and how are you going to defend this guy and what's the plan and who's the linebacker and who's the safety, and now you go, whew, new priorities. Don't have to worry about Brock Bowers if you're the defensive coordinator any longer.
Only Mike could mention LeBron and Michael Jordan along with Brock Bowers in the same sentence. But listen, for Carson Beck, this changes things, obviously. Super comfortable with Brock Bowers. Who do you think, if it's not Ladd McConkey, he's most comfortable with other than Brock?
Well, that's a good question. You know, we mentioned McConkey. Oscar Delp does some nice things, but he's in more of a conventional tight end role, right? He does a little bit more of the blocking as well as going out. Here's the question, Lawson Lucky. This is the name to watch for. People are like, Lawson Lucky. You heard a little bit about this guy in the spring. You heard that he was at the bowl practices. And then, yes, he had tightrope surgery back in August. He's been back 2 games, Emily, but he's only played 9 of 10 snaps these 2 games. Kirby kind of teased this, told us in advance, he's going to fast-track this kid. Lawson Lucky has some playmaking potential at the tight end position. Might be a lot to ask out of a freshman, but right now it's all hands on deck.
It wasn't a lot to ask out of Brock Bowers when he came in when Big O was injured. Yeah. So do you think Lawson might have that maturity where he could handle it? Yeah,
well, I know he's got the desire. You go back and look at some of his interviews last summer, some of those paid interviews that he did. He said he was hungry. He gained a lot of confidence practicing against the championship defense in those bowl practices. You think about how valuable that is for him right now, that he's got that sort of confidence, that he had those spring drills and he was so successful. He's got something to build on. He's got the confidence. Now I think he just needs the opportunity.
And you mentioned Delp. Let's not sleep on Delp, not yet. Probably not the abilities that Brock has, but not many people have those abilities, let's be honest. But do you feel like he'd be able to step up in a quote-unquote leadership role, be able, and he's young, and be able to step into those shoes? I don't know if he'll be able to fill Brock Bowers' shoes, but step into like the number 1 tight end for this team shoes?
I think he just needs to keep doing what he's doing. He's gotten better every single week. You saw him score a touchdown. I think he's got 2 touchdowns on the year. He's a very solid player. He's been in position to do big things, as you said. He stepped up last year when Darnell was injured. He played in both of those playoff games. But I think Oscar Delp has to play his role. A lot of these guys can only do what they do. You know, you got what you got. Dominic Levitt gave you 9 catches last week. He's not going to do more than that. Ra Thomas has come so far. Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint does what he does. Dejon Edwards does what he does. The question is, where do you find the extra? And that's where McConkey coming back, Lawson Lucky being put into the lineup, and perhaps Kendall Milton. I mean, we saw some good things from Kendall in the first half before he took a helmet to the knee, aggravated that MCL. I think he could be back. I think they sat him second half. Kind of a precautionary measure. Sure would be nice to get a lift from Kendall Milton in the second half of the season. And Dylan Bell, every week his role has expanded. The wide receiver who's shown you that he can play tailback, every week looks a little bit more comfortable, starting to fill up those Kenny McIntosh shoes just a little bit more with that versatility.
Are you willing to tell me whether you feel that we will never see Brock Bowers in a UGA uniform again?
Yeah, that's a lot, because you know that as soon as Brock Bowers is cleared to play, he's going to play. Now, you read on the internet it's 3 to 6 week or 4 to 6 week, but I was talking to Ben Watson, and Ben, of course, played in the NFL as well as Georgia, and he said, look, you can't compare. Everybody's different. Every injury is different. We don't know how fast the swelling goes down. We don't really know the prognosis. And we don't know if maybe there's more injuries out there that we're not aware of, Emily. I mean, that was a pretty serious injury. A lot of people said, ankle sprain. And I'm thinking, for this cat to stay down on the turf, let me tell you, Brock Bowers has probably sprained his ankle 24 times, and he knew that wasn't an ankle sprain for him to stay down like that.
All right, so now let's get to Ladd McConkey, who, has been suffering those, the back tightness, the back injury. And Kirby said in his press conference after that Vandy game, after that Vandy win, that the problem remains that he gets tight at halftime, and we don't really see much of him in the second half. How do you resolve this?
Well, I first of all, I think part of the reason we didn't see more Ladd in the second half is that Brock Bowers went down in the first half. Let's be honest. Kirby is the master of roster management. You think about the whole rivet popper thing. I'm going to take you down another path
can't
here,
wait.
right?
Let's do it.
You're sitting on the airplanes and all the rivets stop popping. You say, at some point, when does that wing go, right? How many guys has Georgia lost off of this football team? How many different players have been sidelined by injuries? Kirby Smart has somehow held this together, whether it's through the game plans or whether it's how he's managed the roster and brought this team this far. You're talking 24 wins, you're talking 18 straight weeks at number 1, and there's no way that he's going to put Ladd McConkey out there in the second half against Vanderbilt up 24-7 and throw the ball around. I think Ladd is okay. I think Ladd is where a lot of the chips are going to be cashed against Florida, and I think he's the guy you got to look for maybe to help try to carry this team forward.
So do you think he's the savior? Everything is going to lie on Ladd McConkey?
That's a lot to ask of one player.
I'm asking.
That's the guy that brings the breakout.
What about Ra-Ra, though?
I think Ra-Ra Thomas, like I said, is kind of giving you what he's got. He made a really nice catch against Vanderbilt. You got to consider this. I mean, these transfers have only made their first touchdown catches in the last
Recently,
2 games.
yep.
And neither one of them had cracked 60 yards going into that Kentucky game. I don't want to say they've been disappointing because I don't think they have. I just think that their roles have maybe been a little bit more limited than we expected. Maybe we got a little spoiled by Lawrence Cager and what he did when he came in and what an impact and dynamic player he was just a few years ago. I think both of these guys have had to learn the Georgia offense. They've gotten better each week, but you kind of got what you got there. And now you got to find that extra.
Lawrence Cager, I still remember that touchdown against Notre Dame in that end zone.
Yeah.
That was unbelievable. He came here from Miami. So really quickly, Mike, so Ladd McConkey's who we're leaning on, but Kendall Milton, you mentioned MCL is bothering him.
Yeah.
And he had maybe perhaps his best game of the season at Vandy before that happened. So are we leaning on him a little bit more? Are we worried about his injury too?
Well, I think all these guys, the injuries don't just go away, right? It's not the video game where you hit the reset button and everybody's back to 100. That's just not how it works. These injuries are managed throughout the season. They get a little bit better. They've got a couple of weeks. This bye week obviously came at a great
Amazing time, yes.
Amazing. And there's another break for Georgia. There's been a lot that's had to go right for Georgia to win 24 straight games. And you know what streak's really amazing? They've won 23 in a row in SEC games. If they win another SEC game against Florida, they will tie Steve Spurrier's mark from 94 to 97 of 24 straight SEC wins. And how poetic would that be? So there's a lot on the line. Kirby's doing his best to manage the roster. Bobo's going to take a look at what he's got. That, as Kirby said, they're not playing with the full deck now. Kind of feel like the aces have been taken out with Brock Bowers out of that offense.
Yes.
Got to figure out a different way to get it done. You know Mike Bobo's going to work on that. Did see some offensive line improvement against Vanderbilt, saw a little bit more continuity. Let's see if Xavier Truss is back. Let's see when Amarius Mims gets back. Okay. So there's still some guys out that I think could come back, help Georgia, and help boost this team over this final stretch.
I do have a couple questions left, and this one is not, I'm not trying to put you in a bad spot. I just really wonder about your opinion. Grass versus turf. Do you lean one way or the other? Now, I know Georgia practices, their indoor has turf. Yeah. You know, they're obviously outdoors, they have grass, but do you feel like there's something to that whole, like, players have more injuries on turf? Or, and again, I'm not trying to like put you like in a bad spot here, but some people really feel strongly about that, and obviously Brock got injured on turf.
Yeah, I mean, some injuries are more likely than others on turf, and there's also some advantages to turf, and I know the NFL has done some studies on this, and the turf's a little bit harder. I think it's a little bit more prone to maybe concussions. I feel like it's a little bit harder. Maybe the footing, you know, you're more likely to get something trapped under somebody, whereas the grass would give. I don't know that we can really attribute Brock's injury to that. I mean, let's face it, every time Brock Bowers caught the ball, you know, usually it was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people that would hit him before he went down. And you almost feel like, and I made this, you know, comparison in a story I did on Dog Nation, you know, I couldn't believe it the night I heard Tim Tebow got injured against Kentucky. I couldn't believe it the night I heard Mike Tyson got knocked out. And I had a hard time believing that number 19 was on the turf. But these are humans. I mean, they work very hard. But at the end of the day, this is a really violent, physical game. And I think if you take enough hits, sooner or later, your number comes up.
My last question for you, the schedule coming up. A very tough one. This is like the tough meat of their schedule. You got Florida right after the bye, then Mizzou, then Ole Miss, then Tennessee. That is week after week after week of having to play your best ball without your best player.
Yeah, arguably the toughest schedule that anybody's seen in recent history. Emily, I haven't researched it yet, but I'm not sure that there's been another team that's played the final 4 games of their SEC schedule against teams that all have control of their destiny. You take a look at all these teams, they're also all coming off of wins. Even Ole Miss and Georgia Tech, which I believe had byes, they had wins before the byes. Everybody has momentum except Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs, and that's what they're going to use this bye week for, right? What did Kirby say at Vanderbilt? Bring your own juice, and construction hats, by the way. But he's going to have to find some momentum during this bye week.
And we're going to bring him some juice if we can. Mike Griffith, AJC Dog Nation, thank you so much for your time. We're bringing juice.
All right, so thank you to Emily and Mike for tuning in, giving us a lot of good insight. I think Mike is totally right. They're going to have to find some juice in this bye week. Kirby said that they had a lot of good energy at practice today. However, it was not their best practice. All right, we're going to switch gears to some Falcons talk. Ellie, I am very vocal about how I feel about Desmond Ridder on this show. I'm going to give you the floor for a few minutes before we go and talk about the issues that are these turnovers the Falcons are having.
I'm just going to go right into the turnovers because that's been his main problem the entire season, arguably. You don't win games if you give up the ball 3 times.
In one game, 3 interceptions.
3 interceptions. And they got incredibly lucky because I believe the Commanders only scored once off of those. And it was not like they kind of gave those possessions back. Like it should have been a much worse game,
for sure.
At least score-wise, than it was.
Yeah, and I think if you look back, they didn't have that many turnovers in the first 3 games, and then these last 3 games have been a doozy. You had the game against the Lions, which was not Ritter's best performance. He comes home. He plays really well against the Texans, I believe, able to pull out a win, and then this game against the Commanders just doesn't fall that way. Arthur Smith spoke to media on Monday specifically about those turnovers.
You turn the ball over, and you're -3. Your chances of winning are pretty low. So how do you shake it out? I think it's been about 6% this year, according to the numbers that looking at this morning. Give or take what it is, right? If you lose the turnover battle, especially, just goes on. So if you're +3, I think it's like a 94%. It's always changed a little bit year. That's kind of held true for a long time in this game, and so we got to do a better job of taking care of the football and finding ways to get the ball from the other team. So that's certainly making it hard. As you slice it up, you can slice up numbers however you want, but that's a critical factor we've got to eliminate. The operational errors, again, that hasn't been a trend. We can't let it become a trend, but they happen. And so you have to acknowledge that it's easy to say what happened, why it happened, and what are you going to do to fix it. So those are things you're looking through. All through them are different. That's why I said yesterday, it's on all of us, but we can do a better job. But we gotta. It's not all going to be on one person, the quarterback, right? We got to get lined up. So you're not late in the shot clock, and you can see some of the pressure stuff. But that's what happened yesterday. And subbing late, trying to get a guy back in there, trying to get the right call. Get late on there, and then you got to make a decision to burn the timeout. That shouldn't happen either. So those are things we got to fix. Like I said, it hasn't been an issue around here, but you have to acknowledge it did happen. And it hurt us, and we can't let that become a trend, just like the turnovers.
I guess now 10 starts in, how much do you feel like you know about Des?
Yeah,
maybe still don't know.
You learn a lot. I mean, the thing is that he's a very tough-minded guy. I think you guys that deal with him know that. He's a real person. I think what's endearing about him is he's very honest. And he's got a lot of courage, and I think that's a big part. Just like I said, I think when you stand up here, it's easy to stand up here when everything's going well. You want to jump in front of the parade, but your job as a head coach, play caller, quarterback's league is to stand in there, and be accountable. And it's not on him, but he is one of the more accountable people I've coached. And so certainly you can say it's growing pains and whatnot. Like I said, Mike, you'd love to be able to say, well, the passing game is getting a lot better, but throw 3 picks, the end result's not going to be what you want. But that part of our offense is clearly expanding. I think you're trying to be more balanced. I've said it. we've been different from 21 to 22, now in 23. You know, this young core of skill guys as we're trying to continue to evolve and be more balanced, which we think will certainly help us in the long run. We've got to eliminate some of these critical errors. But I think you can't deny the fact that the passing game has gotten a lot better. But we've got to eliminate some of the critical mistakes. And it's refreshing to coach a guy like Des because he is honest, aware, coachable, as we all try to be.
Emily Gagnon here.
That is Smith. If you didn't hear him, he said Ridder is one of the most accountable players he's ever coached, which is good. I guess there's a lot of self-awareness in that. Ridder also told media that he grades himself after every game, and I believe one of the most recent games, the Texans game, he said that he gave himself a C, or he's always evaluating. So I'd be interested. I don't think he would give you what his grade was probably for this last game against the Commanders, but there needs to be improvement. All right, Ellie, let's get into some of these big NFL storylines of the day. We'll start with Aaron Rodgers. He joined Pat McAfee on his show on ESPN. He is saying that he is ahead of schedule, which was obvious. He was seen without crutches and throwing the ball a little bit. He reiterated that he wants to play this year. The next goal is jogging and then going through some warm-ups, cutting, swerving. He's about 5 weeks out. What do you take away from all of this? Do you think it's just he's trying to manifest the fact he'll be healthy and be able to play if the Jets are even in a playoff contention situation?
I think the only person who genuinely believes that Aaron Rodgers is going to play this season is Mike Greenberg.
And maybe Aaron Rodgers?
I don't think I don't. I think he's trying to manifest it because he knows in his heart of hearts that it's not happening.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
I think.
Why are we talking about this?
Correct. I don't think it's happening either way. So we'll just go into the next storyline. Julio Jones has found a new home. He is going to be with the Eagles, 7-time Pro Bowler. He is going to start on the practice squad. He's been with 3 different teams the last 3 seasons because he's dealt with a lot of injuries. Do you think he finds success with the Eagles?
Maybe. Because I think at this point in his career, he's defining success as a ring on his finger.
Yeah.
He's not going to be the number 1 guy in Philadelphia. I don't even think he expects to be the number 1 guy. I don't think he expects to be the number 2. I think he just wants to be on the roster for a Super Bowl winner, which the Eagles are perfectly capable of doing. And starting the practice squad thing, that's seemingly perfectly normal. Yep. That's nothing to worry about too much. But yeah, I don't think he really expects that much. I don't think the Eagles do.
I think
this is a vet minimum chasing a ring.
He's trying to ride the pony as long as he can, essentially, and see where it lands him. And the Eagles are a great team to do that with. Jalen Hurts and them able to get to the big game last year. So it will be interesting to see how that ends. Another fun topic within the NFL that we have to talk about. So if you've been watching any of the Chargers game, they had these AI robots in the stands that caught a lot of fans off guard. Well, Monday Night Football against the Cowboys were able to pull out the win, but they had this fan they kept centering in on. Her name is Marianne, and she was very theatrical and animated, and everyone thought she was kind of like a plant. She had a new jersey. Everyone was like, it's too much. They're forcing it too much. And people started to believe that they didn't believe she was real. The best part was journalism did its thing today. They found her. She also went and talked on Pat McAfee's show. Everyone from Tom Pelissero were tweeting about her. Apparently, her and her husband are huge Chargers fans. They go to all the games. They do the cabana suites that they have. So she's a huge Chargers fan. But can you imagine thinking someone who's actually a fan, she's a diehard Chargers fan, is a plant? I mean, I get the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift thing is probably a plant for PR and publicity for the league, but come on.
I mean, as a music fan, I hear, oh, this person is an industry plant so often, and it's almost never true because whomst amongst us hasn't, gone wild at a football game. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to knock this poor woman for being a fan and showing it, and right? I'm not going to knock ESPN for going, that's a very interesting person. We should show her on television.
Let's zoom in. So it was funny. I thought it was really funny that they were able to find her and talk to her, and she got to talk about her fandom a little bit. From football to a different type of football, Michael Bradley, former U.S. men's national team captain, is set to retire. He spent the last so many years with Toronto. They are not in the playoff picture. The last day for regular season games in MLS is Saturday, so he's calling it a career. He's probably one of the most decorated players in U.S. men's national team history, which is, I'll be honest, I used to be very hard on him when I watched this team a lot, especially in the 2014 World Cup. But he's had such a phenomenal career, comes from a family that has such a historic background, whether I think he has some uncles that played baseball, writers. I mean, this family is full of sports gurus, so to speak. Debuted in 2006, 151 caps, third all time because of that number. Big guy when you look at the U.S. men's national team, Ellie.
Ultimately, I think he's obviously one of the more important players in the team's history, and he might be one of the best. Clearly top 10, maybe even top 5.
Yeah.
Because who do you put ahead of him? Landon Donovan, Clint Dempsey, Tim Howard.
I was about to say Tim Howard.
Maybe that's just recency bias.
Yeah.
I'm not that old. I don't remember. Maybe the dark days of the 1990s of MLS 1.0,
But in recent years, he's definitely up there, too. So it comes to an end. It will be awesome to see in Toronto what kind of reception he gets for a time well done in the soccer world. How we always love to end this show on Sports Tonight is, what is on your mind? Ellie, I will let you have the floor.
What is on my mind is the question, what are the Marlins doing? So the GM of Miami Marlins, Kim Ng, will not return as the GM of the team in 2024. The rumor is that the Marlins wanted to hire a president of baseball operations above her, and she did not like that. She is the first woman to ever be a general manager of a Major League Baseball team, and the Marlins were in the playoffs this year.
Yep.
Which is not a position they're usually in, frankly. No. How do you piss off a general manager that took you to the playoffs?
Yeah, I don't know how that's the trajectory of all of that. It's baffling, too, especially after you go to the playoffs.
I hope she lands somewhere that
you got to think she will, right?
I hope she lands somewhere that actually respects her, which actually respects her is the key word there, because what jobs do you have open?
Yeah.
Boston. They go through general managers faster than the Cleveland Browns go through quarterbacks. There aren't many
Too bad Scott's not working tonight. He'd love that.
There aren't many great general manager openings right now.
No. So we will see. That will be interesting to keep tabs on, as you know, right now, wrapping up the NLCS, Phillies, Diamondbacks going on. Still baseball season, but before that, you know it, we're going to be seeing how everything plays out. For me, what is on my mind? Calais Campbell. He donated $150,000 to teachers and schools, to the 4 places he spent time in during his NFL, so Jacksonville, Atlanta, and he just celebrated his 100th career sack, which is awesome. And in celebrating that, he actually went to Dick's Sporting Good and was working with kids from Booker T. Washington on their forum and buying them book bags. And he's just a really stand-up guy. It's always fun to talk to him. He's always very insightful, and we're really grateful for that time when he talks to us. So to see him celebrate his 100th career sack and then be out in the community, you don't really see that a whole lot. So just a stand-up guy, and awesome when people can give back to the community. So, all right, that will wrap it up for this tonight of Sports Tonight. You can obviously listen to this in the podcast form. Tune in every night, Monday through Friday at 6:30 for all the shows and much, much more. The Falcons get back underway tomorrow out in Flowery Branch. They are preparing for the Tampa Bay Bucks, so we will have all the latest on tomorrow night's Sports Tonight. For Ellie Parker, I'm Bailey Burmaster. You all have a great night.